It's just 1 week after the setline is released and we already have another training comp. It feels like there's one almost every day and I actually love it. This one is about Ekko carry. You probably have seen it or heard it, but you might be wondering why it works or how it works, and in this video I'm going to tell you exactly how it works. So just in case you don't trust this comp, actually Beppo managed to climb master very fast by playing this comp and some other comps as well, as you can see here, here, and here. As for myself, I started to try to play this comp yesterday to try it and understand how it works. It didn't work that well here. As you can see, I finished 5th, 7th, 4th, 7th, 8th. I didn't even manage to find Ekko 2 at this one. But after I realized that I was making some mistakes that actually prevented me to have good games, good mid games, to survive enough to find Ekko 3. And after fixing that, I realized that this comp was actually really good if you can play it properly, as I finished 2nd and 1st. And honestly, it wasn't that hard once I understood the mistake I was doing. So to show you the full comp and how to play from early to late game, I'm going to use the sponsor of this video, Tactor. Tactor is a platform where you can find a lot of guides created by challengers and even pro player who performed 5th at the World Championship in set 8.5. They create guides. Every day you have multiple guides, and we're going to use the Freljord Ekko to use it as a base. I'm going to add on top of it some more information, especially about positioning, and I have some clips I want to show you to show how much positioning is important with this comp. So the final comp for this one is very simple. You will say like it's kind of similar to Garen with Ziggs, but instead of having Ziggs, you have Chalices. And you want to play Ekko. Katarina has 2 rogues. You don't need to activate 4 rogues. Instead, you want to use more useful units such as Lissandra, Sejuani, Sion, or Vi if you don't find Sion, Urgot, and Ashe. And then after, you can see you activate quite a good amount of synergies. The zone can be extremely interesting, especially the chain mode is something that can make Ekko better. And then after, for the early game, if you want to play this comp, obviously you have to be able to push level 7 and slow roll at level 7. But before to do this, you need to be able to survive early game. And the early game, the best early game item holder for Ekko is Viego. There's nothing better than that. I tried other different champions and only Viego managed to make me survive with a healthy amount of HP and gold to be able to be level 7 and stabilize my board with Ekko. So Viego is almost mandatory if you want to play it. If you play around Viego, you want to have another rogue. Zed is the less costly one. And then obviously you want to activate Shadow Isle, which is extremely powerful on Viego, but also on Maokai. And since you have Maokai, you want to play Poppy to activate Bastion. So this is very a good, very early game comp. And you actually can snowball with this. And then after a level 3-2, you push level 6. And this is the moment when, if you already have Ekko and some cool 2-star units, you can switch into Ekko. But if you don't have it, you can still somehow survive stage 3 with Viego. But for sure, at stage 4, you need to have Ekko 2 and you need to be level 7 to start adding these units. Maybe not Sion, you play Vi instead. Maybe not Urgot, you play Jinx instead. Maybe not Sejuani, you have something else instead. But for sure, you need to have 2-star Ekko, 2-star Katarina, 2-star Lissandra. And after, you need also to make sure that your items are good. There's just one thing I don't really like about this guide, but maybe that's my personal taste. I don't like to have blue buff on Ekko. I prefer to have another hand of justice. For the items, I wanted to spend some time on it because I think it's really important to understand the priorities of the items, especially that you will play Twisted Fate. So it's even more important that you understand what items you want to build first, because if you don't, you make the same mistakes as I did and you will not have a good game. So the very first item you want to build, and this is on Viego when you will play Viego in the early game, and that will go on Ekko of course after, it's Jeweled Gauntlet. If you don't have these items first, both units are not going to deal any damage. So if you for instance have Hand of Justice instead of Jeweled Gauntlet, cool, they just don't deal anything and you will still lose fights. But if you have Viego with Jeweled Gauntlet and then after Hand of Justice, and then you give that on Ekko later, they will actually be able to kill targets, sustain themselves, last longer in fights, and be able to close fights, and then you have a good early mid game. Then after the third item you want on Ekko, I don't like the blue buff. I prefer 100% to have Hand of Justice, because that way you make sure Ekko most of the time will have a good amount of heal. If he doesn't have good amount of sustain, he might die many times in the middle of the fight. I did these mistakes. You can see the clear difference between having only 1 Hajj and 2 Hajj. Also, it allows to have 100% crit. so he will crit most of the time, I mean all the time, on his spell, and that gives you no luck or no opportunity to not one-shot a unit. That's what I'm at. Because sometimes he will target a backline unit, and if it doesn't crit, he will not one-shot it, and after he will get one-shot by that unit. So that's really important to have 100% crit on Ekko, in my opinion. Then once you have built these 3 items, you want to stack chalices. You do that on Lissandra, obviously, because that's probably one of the best user of chalices. For positioning also, it's really convenient. And once you have at least 2, I would say 3 is best, but at least 2, you can start building items either for Katarina 3 or Ugo 2. These 2 units are extremely powerful depending on the items you have. And obviously, if you can't find Katarina 3 because she's contested, someone else is playing Noxus Reroll, right? So you can't find Katarina 3, then you just focus on Urgot, who can be an excellent tank / side carry for Ekko. Since I repeated multiple times, this is a comp you want to play with Twisted Fate. So it's very similar to Garen, when you really want to have Twisted Fate to force the Ziggs and the perfect item Garen. Here you want to force the Chalices and the perfect item on Ekko. I showed you earlier, on Ekko you don't have a lot of flexibility with the items. You have to have Jawigalah plus Hush plus Hush. And this is the reason why Twisted Fate is important. However, I will still say that if you have this, because you start with the Prismatic, don't pick it. It doesn't make your team much stronger. Because, okay, a Radiant item is good, but it doesn't make your team much stronger. While most of the other players will have an excellent augment, and you will actually lose the game just because you pick this. Also, there's no guarantee that you find a Radiant Chalice or Radiant Jawigalah or Radiant Hush before like 10-15 rounds. There's no guarantee because like there's so many items, so it's very gambly. However, those 2 are really good. And then after, I suggest not to pick any of this, because I will show you the other augments. You have very, very strong augments for this comp, and you have to be extremely picky, because if you pick just a good enough augment, like for instance item grab bag, then you put yourself as a disadvantage, and you don't want this. This is another mistake I made and made me lose some games before I realized that I have to be very, very picky with the augments and the items. So speaking of the augments, I think this is the right moment to talk about it. There are 2 types of augment that are really interesting. Well, first of all, Unified Resistance. I think this augment is overpowered. I'm putting this augment in almost all my guides because it's just too strong right now. It will 100% get nerfed later. It's too easy to abuse it. Ekko will love having a bit more of defenses, so he can't be one-shot, for instance, by, I don't know, at the early game by a Jhin ability, or he can't be one-shot by anything that can one-shot, like Lux, for instance. On the other hand, even though you have 2 Hush, having more sustain with Arm Assist or Cybernetic Leech is very valuable. I know this sounds weird, you have already a lot of sustain, Ekko already can sustain from his spell, but you know what? This is one of the weird occasions where there's never enough sustain as long as you have already damage. Make sure that you already have the damage, because anyway, if you don't have damage, you can't sustain anything, right? But these are 2 extremely powerful augments for Ekko, and you will love them. For the gold versions, obviously, the 3 augments I showed just earlier, but in gold, are also very relevant. So if you have them in gold, pick them. But you also have a couple of other cool things to pick for Ekko. So first of all is Idealism. Anyway, you have 2 Hush on Ekko, so I don't know if this stacks. I assume it is, but maybe not. Anyway, at least 18% more damage on Ekko is perfect. That way you make sure that Ekko will one-shot the target that you want. And this is a life and death matter. Then after Gifts from the Fallen, this augment is extremely valuable because a lot of time Ekko will finish last surviving unit on your board. So it means that he will get tons of AD, AP, armor, magic resist from all the other units that died in your board. So this is actually very valuable for Ekko. And finally, Know Your Enemy. The second you start one-shotting 1 unit, and that happens rather fast in the early game if you late game if you position yourself properly, meaning that you don't put Ekko in front of the tank, for instance. Then after you have a buff of 25% more damage for Ekko and Katarina, and they can one-shot almost anyone. And then finally for the Prismatic, so here I wanted to show you, actually you have more than that as good augments. Obviously Cybernetic Leech, I said it, is also good in Prismatic. But here you have a couple of others that I really like to have. Infernal Contract, your max level is level 7, gain 85 gold. Obviously you want that because you just level 7 forever. You don't need to push level 8. So this is like, hey, gain 85 gold without any bad side. I take it every day. There's nothing better than this. March of Progress, because you'll be level 7 very easily without spending money. You have also, I think it's Cruel Pact, where you can push level 7 very easily. And after you have obviously combat augments like this one, which are very, very powerful. So I wanted to show you this clip from the mid game, because you have to do something that you have to do every single round. It's exactly what I just did. You have to scout for the players you are going to face, and you need to position yourself properly. Here I see 2 players on the left, but I see them switching on the right side. So I put Ekko here, because the idea, you will see at the beginning of the board, here I'm in front of the carry. So what's going to happen is that Ekko, when he goes below 50% on this health, he will jump directly on Kalista, and turns out, if the timing is correct, he will use its ability directly on her and almost one-shotting her. And then, because if Ekko was here, then he will take no damage, he will get stuck on the tank, then on another tank, and then after Kalista will have the time to stack the Ginzu, and it will be just impossible to kill her. So let's just see the fight and see how it goes. So as you can see, for now, Ekko is on the front line. One thing is about it is like, Ekko, when he uses the rogue spell, stealth, sorry, he removes all the spears from Kalista. So actually Ekko is a strong counter to Kalista. And then after I one-shot her, and since I one-shot the main damage of the team, I just win the fight. And the fight is very easy after that. Once you have Ekko 3, you'll be less punished for not positioning correctly. As you can see, my Ekko was not on the right side. I lost the 50-50. And even though, because I have Katarina 3, Ekko 3, Urgot 2 with TG, I can still win that way. 1772 damage. Yeah, I mean, can't really do much against that. But yeah, what I really want to show you guys is that every turn you need to scout very, very regularly. The second you start to play Ekko and Rogues, you have to scout every single turn. So I think this is the reason why this comp is not necessarily good for beginners, because I think a lot of beginners don't do this kind of scouting, but you have to scout. And since you know you're going to face 3 players, you have to put your Ekko where at least 2 players are on one side. You have to do it at the last second of the round. So if people scout you, they don't see you on the right side. I mean, they'll feel like safe. But the reality is that you have to constantly move back and forth to make sure like people can't predict how you're going to move. And that way you can surprise them. And this is how you want to win with Ekko, because if you don't do this properly during stage 3, and I didn't do this properly at my first games, you will lose most of the fight in stage 3, you will lose a lot of health, and then after stage 4, you kind of panic, and you have to roll down, and you have low chance to find Ekko 3 without a lot of money, right? So this is the kind of thing you have to do every single turn, and then if you do it properly, then Ekko is an amazing comp. If you can't do it, then Ekko is going to be a trash comp for you, and maybe you have to play something else because this is just maybe this doesn't fit your playstyle. Ekko is a very niche comp, and it has only 0.15 pick rates on Diamond plus Elo, compared to Tristana Reroll, who has 0.71, if I remember correctly. That's much more contested. But anyway, if you still play Tristana and you have a good start, but you don't manage to have a good score because maybe you're making mistakes and you just don't know which one, I'm making a video here where I told you exactly what kind of mistakes most people are doing with Tristana and prevent them from actually winning with this very powerful comp. See you at the top of the ladder.